start and say welcome everybody to tonight's session. Beautiful weather outside, and obviously there's football on the horizon as well that some people might be interested in watching. So really appreciate everybody being here for session 4, sorry, of our leading curriculum in small schools. So it's our final session, and we hope, and the feedback to date has been that people have found it to be really useful and very provoked some thinking. So we're really pleased about that. Now, in the email correspondence that we sent out, we did ask that people maybe have some questions or some specific scenarios that are happening in their schools that they may want to share with us at the end and have a discussion. So we'll definitely make time for that at the end of this afternoon session. There's a number of us who are going to be contributing to today, so you're going to hear lots of different voices. I'm really pleased that we've got Elaine online this evening again, who's going to start quite early on in the session and sharing some of the materials that she's been using at Asquith. We've got myself and Don here as well. We're also really pleased to be welcoming Jane Bamber from Osmotherley, who's going to be contributing to the session, as well as Pauline Brown from Red Kite, who's here and along and is going to be contributing too. So lots of different voices, and we hope that you find this final session useful. So in our previous session, the last session that we had, session 3, we focused very much on the importance of schools providing effective monitoring and evaluation of their curriculum. We know that as small schools, capacity of leaders, particularly around our subject leadership, is particularly challenging. And is often a question that we get asked about, and is often an area that we've given lots of support. And we hope that what we shared with you has really helped you to think about how you can make that more effective in your small school. We stress particularly the importance of being systematic in that approach and being well planned, and thinking carefully about the use of, say, staff meeting times alongside that, and having sort of thinking about a less is more approach. So being very consistent with that, so that it's not overwhelming. Everybody knows what's expected, and everybody is working from sort of some common formats, that it isn't requiring too much time to complete. And we know that that will look different in different schools, and Ofsted particularly are very aware of that with our small schools, that we can't apply a larger schools model to a smaller school in terms of what makes effective monitoring. So we hope that some of our the content that we shared last time has really helped you to think about that, and about how you can be more effective going forward. They've got to be easy to complete, and they've really got to be very much focused on that essential information that your school requires to check that you are all staff across the school are implementing that intended curriculum as expected, with that ultimate aim that the school's curriculum is having an impact on pupils knowing and remembering the essential knowledge that's been identified in your curriculum, so that they are embedding those skills and knowledge, which is leading to that automaticity and that fluency as they go forward. So freeing up their working memory to be able to deal very much with the new knowledge. So today's session, our final session, is going to focus on how to use learning from the CPD programme that we've shared to strategically plan your key improvement areas for your existing school's curriculum, and to think about how you might sort of identify from that those key next steps for your curriculum in 2024-2025. So very much thinking about what we've been sharing with you, how that might have prompted thoughts and priorities that have emerged that you will be considering including in perhaps your school improvement plan next year. We're going to provide some simple self-evaluation questions as we go through the session, and that hopefully will help you to identify exactly what is it that you need to do, so that those next steps will be more precise for you, so that you can connect and deepen your curriculum more effectively. So, as I said, and we've been really grateful to Elaine, who's been sharing lots of the materials that the team at Asquith have developed over a number of years, and now feel that they have a model that they're implementing that is consistent and is effective. And Elaine shared at the end of the session lots of their monitoring forms. So I'm going to ask her now just to open up the session really by sharing some of those same monitoring forms, and talk about the completion of those and go through some examples that she's been able to share, anonymized examples of those in action, basically, so that you can see what that recording looks like and how what we've been talking about keeping it simple and effective is really the most powerful way for our small schools to move forward with our monitoring systems. So hi Elaine, I'm going to share the slides that you shared with me, and hopefully colleagues can see that and have a copy of that in their notebook. So yeah, if I can just pass over to you, Elaine. Thank you.
Thank you, Jo. Good evening, everyone. So basically, the aim of these monitoring forms, I think I said the last time, was for something that was going to be simple. It was going to be very easy to fill in, and so therefore not time consuming. And as Jo said, over a period of time, this is what we've come up with. But basically, it covers the areas of discussion with the child, which is absolutely crucial, with them with their books, so you get an understanding of that knowledge build up. Do they really understand how they've built the knowledge? Do they understand where perhaps the teacher has helped them to build their knowledge? So there are key questions there on that first part of the document. So all your admin bits at the top, as you would imagine. Then, as you can see, because it is the most important part, it's discussion with I beg your pardon, discussion with children. So, and straight away, how does your teacher check what you know? So you would want the child to be coming out with, we do knowledge checks. Our children are very familiar with the language of knowledge checks, which I'm sure a lot of your children are as well. We do mini knowledge checks, and the whole purpose is for children to understand why, and so that they can articulate why they do these things, and it's not just something that they just happen to fill their books with. So that's a big part of it. Okay, then we move on to finding out, well, supposing there are gaps within your that particular part of the knowledge that you're building, what happens then? How do you know that your gaps are being plugged? What does the teacher do to help you? And we're wanting children to be able to articulate that sometimes they've just forgotten something and the teacher helps them with that. It could well be that there's a gap in their knowledge, which the teacher would help them with. And the children are articulating it. They're using that language. There's a gap in my knowledge, I've forgotten the knowledge, or there's been a misconception. And we're wanting to check, especially as they get older, that language is pretty secure with them. And then to be able to talk about the why this, why now, within the context of what are you doing today? Why are you doing it? What did you do yesterday? How is this helping you to build your knowledge? And that's really key. Then we move on to why does your teacher mark your work? Children need to understand that marking the work is meaningful. They need to be able to articulate that that's what's going to actually help them with their knowledge build up. And if they can't, then how useful is that particular piece of marking? So we find that's really key in understanding the impact of the feedback that we give the children. Okay, and then it's questions like, how do you know you're remembering more? So that they're bringing it all together through that sort of discussion that you're having with them. And then the key bit as well at the bottom is, and we did a lot of thinking around this, you get children that are off, they may be ill or holidays, whatever happens with children these days. And how do you help children how does your teacher help you to catch up on missed work? And that's really important, isn't it? Because it can't just be that children are kept in at playtime to copy up a load of work that they've missed, because that then is going to lead ultimately in gaps in knowledge. So we discussed as a staff, well, what are we actually going to do with children who've missed work? Because they're not there to get the input. They're not there to be part of the dialogues that go on in the class. So how are we going to ensure that they are at least grasping the basic elements of that particular aspect of knowledge that you're wanting them to build. And we decided that what we will do is they will have certain questions that we would want them to be able to answer about that particular piece of work. And that's booster work that the teacher will do with them and find some time to fit that in. And then it may well be that they work with a peer on the knowledge that that peer has acquired for that particular part that they missed when they were away, and do it that way, and then check it when we give the next knowledge check. Does that make sense? Is that clear?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's good. Thank you.
Could you put the next sheet on, please, Jo?
Yeah, there we go.
And then this next part of it is literally just a tick box with the odd little comment, and that's looking at it's clear there, isn't it? It's looking at the book scrutiny, and then in the drop in, and it is literally a drop in, 15 minutes drop in. Are you seeing in practice what you've gathered from talking to the children? Or it may well be that you do the drop in first, and then that's confirmed from discussion with the children and then the book. And it's just a tick box, and it literally takes very, very little time to do. And we found that works for us. And has been a successful way of having these assessments, this monitoring of what's going on across the school, and it's consistent across the school. So if we show the next one, please, Jo.
Elaine, we've just got a question there. I think Susie's just put her hand up. Susie, do you want to...
Susie.
All right, Susie, do you want
to... Sorry, I know it, and I just can't think it. What does CK and NK stand for?
Oh, I'm sorry, that's me with my jargon.
Right.
Yeah. So CK is connected knowledge, so the knowledge they should know, and NK is new knowledge. So
thank you.
And it's really important, isn't it, so that the connected knowledge is secure before we move on to new knowledge, because it's that connected knowledge that's going to be the foundations for the new knowledge. So again, a key part of it when analysing where these children are up to in their knowledge build-up.
Lovely, okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Susie. And then the next one, have you got another one there, Jo, did you say?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
So we've got different kind of versions for different subject areas. So this one here is when we're observing spelling lessons, because whilst they're consistent in that they are short and sharp, hopefully, and they're focusing in on the pupils specifically, and what they know, different subjects require different things. So here, spelling lesson, you've got the tick box at the side there, particular to spelling in certain aspects. And then is this program the way that we want to teach spelling, recap, teaching, practice and apply? Is that happening? Is that consistent across the school, so that the spelling lead knows, yeah, we've decided that we've agreed this together as a staff, this is going to be our approach, and it is being followed consistently across the school. And that's just a really simple one. And there we have a phonics one. Okay, same sort of premise really as I've just discussed. And daily and weekly reading one, again relevant to that particular subject area, but the same principle, easy to fill in hopefully, and revealing. That's the main thing, is it's revealing about the knowledge build up that we want the children to acquire.
Great. Elaine, can I just ask then at this point, because the key to success with these forms is around how the staff use them. So as the leader of the school, how have you worked with your staff team to ensure that everybody, the team, when they're going into the class and they're using these forms, how they understand what is expected, so that to build that confidence up around the use of these forms for all staff, to make it meaningful, evidence that they're gathering, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, we're lucky, we're a small school so there's 5 of us, and we create each form together. So every single form we've created, whether it's English or non-core, so everybody knows what the form means because they've been part of creating it.
Yeah, great.
Does that answer your question, Jo?
Yeah, it's that agreement, isn't it? So each section everything that's on there has been agreed by the whole team. So that discussion, that it's not just you doing it as in a sort of a top-down way, is it? It's very much as a team agreeing these together. And I think just linking there, when you said we're a small school, that's a benefit of a small school, isn't it?
It is. It's a huge benefit.
That agreement around the use of these is really everybody saying together, let's do this. It's not so much light touch, but it's almost sharp, deeper touch, isn't it? Because everybody's very sharp and clear on it, and we're gathering the right information, and everybody's doing that equally. So yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Elaine, for just, I hope for colleagues it helps just to see what when we shared these last in the last session, you know, actually it isn't onerous in terms of what's being recorded on these, but it's very meaningful information to be brought back for gathering evidence about the effectiveness of the curriculum. So that's just great, Elaine. And if colleagues, you know, reflect on what they've just seen and have any questions, you know, please bring those to, you know, at any point, but we'll definitely have more time at the end as well to unpick them. Thanks, Elaine. Okay, so we're just going to move on then and just then think about where we are. Okay, so we're talking around thinking about that CPD, but one of the things that's obviously really crucial to our discussions is around that flexibility, and that comes through in the monitoring, but it also, and I just wanted to remind us about this, it comes through in how we adapt what we're doing to meet the needs of our class structures. Because they are unique often, you know, definitely the mixed age group, but we can have different combinations of that, and that can vary year on year. We know that, so it can be a challenge. We might have a reception year 1-2 class one year, but it might be that the year 2s are with the 3s and 4s the next year. So we appreciate very much that can change. So that's why so much this flexible approach, the flexible approach to monitoring is essential. And it's also essential, I think we talked about this in our second session, is that we constantly think about that, ensuring that the use of time in our lessons is used as effectively as possible. So to enable us to be teaching, for example, in the maths, 2 different maybe contents at the same time, particularly when we're using schemes, and if there hasn't got that mixed stage planning and wanting to make sure that each year group gets their intended curriculum and their endpoints are very clear, that's often a feature of what's going on in our mixed stage classes. What's important, though, is that what one year group is doing whilst the other year group is being taught by the class teacher, it's important it's not just a holding task that's been overseen by a helicopter TA that's just keeping children quiet. What's really important at that time is that we're making deliberate decisions about what is happening for the other year group. And this is an excellent time for children to be doing deliberate practice, consolidation, and addressing misconceptions. So we want to make sure that that time is used effectively, and that's a strategy that is very much implemented across the school. A feature of what we say is happening in our curriculum, making sure that, you know, great care is taken, that all staff across the school know that that is an expectation. So as I say, and that can be then very well supported, not sort of observed by the teaching assistant, but supported, that, you know, with an assistant who's very clear on what children are expected to know and remember, and he's able to support them in addressing those misconceptions, doing corrections, practicing more of the things, and having those conversations that Elaine said very much, the children at the start of what she talked about, the children being able to articulate their learning and talking about why they've gone wrong, and having that additional time for practice. It's really key. We need to make sure, and I've seen this happening across schools, that often, and I'll use maths as an example, schools can fall into a trap of giving children at that time, the year group that's not been taught specifically by the class teacher, giving them, you know, maths to do, but that sometimes, particularly in commercially produced resources, that maths, those workbooks, worksheets can move children on to new learning that they haven't actually been taught before. So we need to be very careful with with that use of resources that we haven't created ourselves to meet the needs of the children at those times, because it can expose that we're rushing children, or we're putting them in situations where they're perhaps going to make mistakes, and maybe misconceptions may embed because they haven't got proper supervision at that time, and they're not being taught, haven't been taught that new learning. We also need to make sure, and I'm speaking obviously to lots of very experienced colleagues who are doing this or very well already, but it's that flexible approach to deploying our teaching assistants and making sure that they're really explicit. To them, it's really clear the precise knowledge that children are expected to know in each lesson. So it's about sharing the planning. It's about how we involve our colleagues, our support assistant colleagues, in knowing exactly what is expected, so that when they're working perhaps in one-to-one or small group situations, they are reinforcing, they are helping children to connect to prior knowledge, they're helping them to embed new knowledge. So how we ensure that one of our greatest resources in schools is our support assistants. It's crucial that we have time and we develop those systems of how we make sure that they're very clear on that knowledge that's needed, and whether that requires some additional training around it. So I think particularly there around phonics, for example, it's important that we don't just think about keeping our teachers up to date with phonics and checking that our teachers, but we also need to remember we need to be working with our support assistants regularly as well, to help ensure that their training around phonics is as secure as the teachers. And the final bullet point here is around just being careful. It's really accepted, and again, Ofsted are very clear on this, that in our small schools they will walk into classes and expect to see in our foundation subjects a class group that has year 4, year 5 and year 6 would all be potentially being taught the same about the Romans. But underneath that they may be being taught that substantive knowledge on the same sort of key topic or aspect of the Romans. But underneath that, what we need to make sure that we're very careful about is that we're adapting perhaps the disciplinary knowledge that children are being taught, and that would potentially be different. And we'd need to be making sure that that's progressive, so that we would be expecting slightly different things for our year 4s in that year group to our year 6s when it came particularly to their independent tasks, how they were applying that knowledge and what they're expected to do with that substantive knowledge. So just wanted to recap and remind about those, because those kind of aspects around flexibility and adaptation of what we're doing on our small schools are really crucial if we're going to get it right. So as we stated at the start, obviously this is the perfect time of the school year to review your school's curriculum. It is the time when we're coming, hopefully the majority of content will be taught, although there is always that time when we're frantically trying to make sure we've covered everything. And this time obviously gets a bit disrupted with assessments and national assessments that are going on. But it is the time to really look at it and to think about what's gone well and what do we need to do more of, or do even better going into this next academic year. And throughout this programme, what we hope has come across is we've particularly focused on key pieces of research to identify, and those 3 pieces of research have come from Daisy Christodoulou, John Hattie and Daniel Willingham. And they're based very significantly on cognitive science research, and that it's very clear from that research that has the biggest impact on pupils' learning. So we hope very much that that's really sort of resonated and has made sense to everybody in our previous 3 sessions. So at this time, is thinking about those key aspects that we've shown through the programme that have a key impact on the effectiveness of your school's curriculum. And they're quite distinct, sort of significant aspects that we'd be, wanting you just to sort of reflect on and think about where you are on the journey with these in your school. So we've talked about and shared with you how fidelity to a systematic intended curriculum in sequence small learning steps is essential. And that's across all classes. That's not just that we've got one class teacher who really does show that fidelity to the curriculum plans, but that we're making sure that each lesson, the why this, the why now, very clearly aligns in all classes to what we have prescribed in our school's intended curriculum. And that those learning steps are small, that we've stripped it back to that key essential knowledge. And if I take a foundation subject, for example, a unit of lessons is going to touch perhaps 6 to 7 key lessons. So within that, we need to be thinking about that essential knowledge that we want children to know in 6 to 7 lessons. And that's making sure that it's not all about lots of hinterland facts and wow experiences, but it's very clear on this is what we need the children to know by the end of the lesson, and build on that knowledge as they go through that unit. Because as I look at bullet point 2 here, the cognitive science says that we must avoid overloading pupils' working memory by too many activities, by too many pieces of essential knowledge. And if we're not well planned, and we haven't stripped back to our curriculum to those small learning steps, then there is the temptation for there to be too many activities going on in a lesson, because we're trying to almost provide too many experiences, activities for children. And often what can happen in those is that the teacher is thinking about the activity more than the learning. So what is it that I want children to know should always come first. They talk about the ensuring that we get that in the right order, the cart before the horse kind of scenario, which is really important. So it's the why this, why now first, before we think about how are we going to deliver this. That activity choice should come second if we're going to make sure that our pedagogical choices are carefully aligned to what we want the curriculum to be for children to be learning from the curriculum. So part of the research that is very significant from Daniel Willingham is that children are more similar than different. And as a result of that being more similar than different, it's really important that we don't overthink around the learning styles, because the research really sort of indicates that those learning styles don't make a difference to pupils' learning. And hopefully that came across, is that we will have some adaptations for our particularly our SEND children, but overall we don't need to plan lessons that are addressing lots of different learning styles. Adaptation for our SEND children is essential, but that's different than thinking about all the different sort of traditional things that we've thought about in the past, like kinesthetic and the visual learner. So that learning style is not as significant as we were led to believe for a number of years. The research around cognitive science very much says that we shouldn't be overthinking that. Don, I don't know whether you want to add anything to that. Is that making sense to you?
Yes, it is making sense. Yes, just that it doesn't exist in the sense that it's going to make a difference to their learning. They may have a preference for a particular learning style, but it shows that it really is breaking things into small steps. So it's not going to make a significant difference, is what has been found out, to their learning.
Thanks, Don. So one of the other key points that Daniel Willingham raises is around humans think they know things before they do. And as a result of that, teaching strategies should provide lots of opportunities for deliberate practice to develop fluency. The example that I just shared around our mixed age classes, with the thinking about what is happening with one year group whilst the other group is being taught, have that as a key sort of principle across your school, that time is very much for that deliberate practice, that we want children to be developing fluency. And that same sort of principle can be sort of applied across all subjects in the curriculum, so not just in maths. Developing that fluency and having that deliberate practice is essential. So Also, we hope, that the programme has shown you that teaching and assessment must employ strategies that help pupils to remember that essential knowledge and skills. And Elaine shared lots of wonderful materials from Asquith, which really show how once we're very clear on that precise knowledge that children are going to learn through our curriculum that's sequenced in small steps, that we can then match up and we know exactly what we're assessing on. Assessment isn't woolly then, based on sort of very open and generic national curriculum targets. It's very precise to our curriculum, so we know exactly what children will be knowing by the end of the lesson, so we know what we can assess on, or by the end of the unit. So alongside that, it's important that it's about knowing more and remembering more over time to make progress. So we need to factor in those recalls and those checks to make sure that it's not just at the end of the unit, it's throughout the unit, it's at the end of the unit. There's a little bit of time left after a unit's been completed, but we come back to that unit and we check it before we start another unit in the history, for example. So we're wanting to know that for children there's been that alteration to their long-term memory and that they're remembering that essential knowledge, because to enable them to be free to take on the next unit of history and the new knowledge from that, we need that working memory to be free and to be ready to go to take on that new knowledge. So teaching strategies should use assessment for learning to address then those misconceptions and those essential knowledge gaps. That helps then for that deliberate practice to be planned effectively, so that we can also then alongside that think about any additional intervention groups that might need to be set up, or any pre-teaching that might need to happen for children, perhaps maybe some of our lower ability children who are really struggling to remember some aspects that are actually essential. So it's a really strong cycle here, isn't it, of having things very precisely set out. We know exactly with precision what we're teaching, then we assess precisely alongside that, and we use that assessment knowledge very precisely to be able to address those misconceptions and knowledge gaps. So we talked about then this being the crucial time for reviewing your curriculum, and we've just got some key sort of questions, and we like to pose questions because there isn't one way to review your curriculum, but whatever you're doing and whether you use these questions and perhaps you make yourself a template and put some narrative towards these, or whether you use these questions in a staff meeting or you use them with discussions with governors, reviewing your curriculum against these questions would mean that you've had a really good think about it and you're identifying, hopefully, some of those sort of key points that I've just discussed on that last slide, sort of thinking, where are we with any of that? How effective is our curriculum being? So firstly, we're sort of thinking about those fidelity checks, and fidelity is about making sure that we are following the intended curriculum. We adapt it to meet the needs of our children, but that we make sure that we are following it. So how do you know the implementation of your intended curriculum for all subjects is being consistently delivered in small steps? And what areas are a priority for further improvement? So Elaine has shared lots of examples around sort of her monitoring and thinking about what those lessons look like through those regular lesson drop-in formats. Where are you with those kind of aspects, and how simple and manageable have you made that in your school to be able to be checking that information and that implementation is doing what we're saying it is doing? And it's not just on one day once a half term when you've got a very much a planned observation maybe in a lesson, but that's the beauty of the drop-ins, because drop-ins for 5, 10, 15 minutes of time can be more regular, so we're just coming in to do that fidelity check. And when you're in there, you'll have noted from the sort of the formats that Elaine has shared with us, she's always asking those questions when they're visiting lessons. All leaders are very conscious of this. There's always a box for a tick or not a tick, in the case may be, about overload and working memory. So is there too much going on? Is there too much new knowledge being taught? So how do you know that in your lessons, in your schools? Do we need to provide reminders to staff about why it's important that that we're not overloading pupils' working memory? And has teaching stopped using learning styles? How do you know? So particularly there around that traditional differentiation and thinking about, oh, which groups of children do I need to put the practical out for, etc. Have we stopped overthinking that? And are we seeing that teachers are really sort of following the correct principles, but are adapting to meet the needs of, adapting resources to meet the needs of the pupils, not just making preconceived ideas that those pupils learn better that way, those pupils in the class learn better that way. So reducing that learning styles approach, but thinking more carefully and strategically around adaptation to meet the needs of the children. Deliberate practice, I've mentioned this a few times, but this is a major question really to ask as a staff team, because it's this practice which really does lead to that fluency and automaticity. So are we providing enough opportunities for deliberate practice in lessons to ensure pupils develop fluency? And do we need to further improve this approach in some classes? Just a key example around this is the recent English review that's been released from Ofsted, and when you dig deep into that, and it talks very much around the transcription and early writing and children, there being sort of almost a rush to write. We need to make sure that children have had enough practice at how to hold a pencil, at how to form the letters correctly, at how to spell, at how to sit correctly at their desks, at how to form and follow a simple dictated sentence, and how to write that accurately and successfully. So that's just an example. What we see sometimes is, we might look in a year one's book or a year two's book, and we see that they've rushed on, they're writing lots of different types of genres of writing within a week or over a couple of weeks. That isn't going, they're not getting enough practice if your workbooks look like that every day looks different, a different concept or a different aspect of writing. We need to slow the process down and ensure that that practice is really building efficiency and ensure that it's engineering success for our pupils. So are our teaching strategies having an impact on pupils remembering and knowing more in all age groups? So let's have a look at what the pedagogy is like in the classroom. Are our teachers following the key principles, and are they thinking about the precise knowledge that they're teaching in the history lesson, for example, right to the end of that history lesson? Or does the history lesson become an art lesson because children then start to make shields, Viking shields, and get sort of hung up on the colours or get hung up on the design? Does it then become a DT lesson? Does the history lesson become a writing lesson where they start writing newspaper reports, and actually the teachers start to have to talk to them about how we write as a journalist or how we present a newspaper report, etc. So really carefully thinking, is what's happening, the pedagogical choices that are going on in my school, are they supporting children knowing and remembering our intended curriculum? So really thinking about, how do we know that, and what needs further improvement? Again, Elaine has shared some great resources over the last few weeks, which are very much linked to assessment and keeping that simple and effective, that precision. So it's that chance to think, are we using assessment for learning to address misconceptions and gaps in pupils' essential knowledge? How do we know, and what are our priorities for further improvement? So when we look through our children's workbooks, when we do our work scrutiny, can we see that the teacher has actually stopped when children have got a clear misconception? Has there been some either additional teaching to ensure that the children are going to get that essential knowledge, or does the teaching just appear to move on to the next thing, almost like the teacher's just turned the page over in the White Rose Math Scheme and is just ploughing on and just keeping up to the programme as opposed to responding to the needs of the pupils? And then finally here, are we promoting a learning culture for children and staff that focuses on memory, practice, and how do you know? What could be further improved? And again, Elena's talked about very much the team approach, making sure that we create things as a team together so that the whole team have a focus on memory and practice. Something for us all to reflect on there if we're going to have the impact as greater impact as we could on supporting children to know and remember as much as they can from the curriculum. So some next steps at this point. So remember, your strategic plans for improvement must be manageable and build firm foundations. Think very carefully about what are the most important key areas to improve first, and perhaps looking at how we've ordered our bullet points might help you to think, yeah, where are we and which would be our best first step to agree. Build improvements in a manageable way, then it will embed more effectively over time. So don't try and do too much too soon. We know it takes a couple of years to really move things on and significantly change a culture, depending upon how the team all work together. Some teams can move quite quickly, but really think about, we've got to keep this manageable. Less is always more. Doing something small effectively and building on that is really the strongest approach to go forward with. And finally, what monitoring systems are we employing that do not provide the information you require? So what can we change and simplify where needed? So how can we reduce but to be more effective? Okay, so whoops, I've rushed on there. So just this last slide then. So we hope that we've shared and we've discussed things over time that may help you. We've talked about Asquith's curriculum toolkit, and we've also opened up the opportunity for colleagues to go and visit Asquith. And we know that many people have been across. I think they've even had visitors this week. And Elaine's offer there is very generous, and her staff team are very comfortable with having people visit them and just go and see. And we're not saying that that's the one set way to do things, but it's amazing when a team will open up and just let colleagues wander around and really just see what they're doing. So, please do continue to take up those opportunities and reflect on those dates, and we hope to be able to open up more opportunities going into the next academic year as well, where you may want to take staff across or go and have a look yourself, and then maybe take staff across to see some of what we've talked about in action. We've also talked about the HART Primary Curriculum Quality Mark that is starting next September. And with that's going to be a really strong self-evaluation programme that will hopefully confirm for schools when they're ready to have the quality mark accredited and go through that process, that they've moved forward with their curriculums. It's really connected. And the programme will be online sessions and support materials and videos and self-evaluation documents to support. So that's something else as we leave you today that is an offer that's open. And we'll also sort of share with you other professional development opportunities that HART has going into the new academic year. And Kerry Young, who has been liaising with colleagues, will be sharing those as we come towards the end of the academic year this year. So just before we pass over to Pauline Brown, I'm just going to ask Don to sort of introduce Jane and the context around what Jane's going to share with us this evening, Don, if that's okay.
Yes, pleased that Jane is here from Osmotherley, and a small school that has taken part in lots of training opportunities, particularly NPQs. And I think Jane is going to just say some of the benefits that her school has got from those programs. So I'll hand over to Jane.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everybody. So as Don said, I'm Jane Bamber. I'm the head at Osmotherley School. We are a very small school. There's just 40 children on roll, but we've actually completed, or in the process of completing, 3 MPQs. So we've done the leading teacher development, the senior leadership, and the leading literacy. And we've actually registered interest in the SENCO MPQ starting in September. And I just wanted to say a few things about how we've benefited from those qualifications. yeah, we found the courses very useful, and in particular, the first module of all of the MPQs was the same, and it focused very much on an overview of the most up-to-date cognitive science. So all of those things that Joe has just been talking about, things like making sure you've got clear progression towards endpoints and connected knowledge within and across subjects, and ensuring that you're not overloading children's working memory, and you have enough deliberate practice for children to become fluent, and lots of opportunities to recall knowledge and identify gaps and help children to remember. And also in ensuring that children understand themselves what it means to be a good learner. Just having done that module, and a number of our staff doing that module, it just provided the reassurance that the decisions that we've made when we were putting together our intended curriculum and the pedagogy that we've decided to follow are the right ones, because they're based on the sort of most up-to-date knowledge. This has also helped when we're sharing principles with the rest of the teaching staff, because it's not just coming from one person. It's been echoed by all of the staff that have accessed that very good training. It's also been really invaluable for school improvement, partly because of the fact that a number of the staff are really very clear on those principles. But it's also the leading teacher development MPQ provided a really clear step-by-step process for identifying and planning and implementing programs of school development. So it helped me to identify what was going into the school development plan last year. I would say in the past I've been too ambitious about the number of things we would work on, but having done that training, it was very clear that to be effective, I needed to be much more precise. By following those steps, as I learned during the MPQ, it's had a much greater impact, really. So that was very valuable. Our reading leader has been doing the Leading Literacy MPQ this year. She's got another module to do in the autumn, and then she'll be finished. And it's really helped her to gain confidence, and it increased her knowledge, obviously, but particularly in the importance of oracy and in the importance of the very early steps of the writing process. So she's currently working on our an oracy progression document, so that we can put oracy throughout the school, which will help. She also, the teacher, Naomi, who's doing that one, said it's given her a real passion for the subject because of the training that she's received. We also found that the way we did the MPQs with Teach First, and we found them to be really manageable in terms of the time commitment. Obviously they've been free, so that's great. And most of the seminars, in fact all of the seminars, are after school, straight after school, and then not longer than an hour. There's a task to do after that, but that doesn't take very long. And there are 2 conferences for full days, but you do get a bit of help with funding, or we got a bit of help with funding to cover the supply for those days. And then at the end of the MPQ, there's a case study. So there's an assignment to do, which is about 2,000 words, and you have guidance to help you complete that. So we've been very pleased with them. It's definitely had an impact on our school. And I think the fact that we're going to sign up for another one in the autumn speaks volumes, really. We're keen to be a self-improving school, and so that's why we decided to try them, and I would certainly recommend them. Definitely benefits a small school. Okay.
Great, thank you so much, Jane, for all of that. It's really helpful and leads us very nicely into thanks, Jane. An opportunity, if you're still on, Jane, just at the end, if colleagues want to ask you any more questions, that would be great as well. So it leads us very nicely on just to introducing Pauline, who I've mentioned from from Red Kite, from the Teaching School Hub, and Pauline's just going to add to what Jane has just shared and sort of give you more information and a further update. So hi, Pauline.
Hi everyone, thanks for inviting me. I didn't ask Jane to say all that. That was really, she said everything. I think it's been great, I think, to reassure colleagues about the workload. I think that was one of the things I was going to start on around the reformed NPQs. I did the very old NPQH, and I've still got my folder of evidence, which is this thick. It's nothing like that. It's very, very flexible, and it's good to hear that Jane's found it flexible as well. So lots of what I'm going to say is going to build on what Joe's mentioned, and obviously Elaine, Asquith, I can only encourage people to go. I was fortunate enough to spend a day in Asquith, and I'm a secondary practitioner by trade, and spending time in early years foundation stages just blows me away. So I would highly recommend it, just to speak to the colleagues in the school. You learn more from that than maybe even dropping into lessons. It's such a rich learning, so I definitely would plug that. So carrying on the theme that Joe mentioned around taking your curriculum work forward, this is how I think the NPQs might support this. As Jane mentioned, there's a really heavy implementation focus and teaching focus. People think the NPQs are actually very different. They're not. The curricula are very similar. The frameworks which the DFE have written, that all the lead providers have to base them on, do have a lot of commonality. So I just want to pull that out, particularly as we're into restricted funding, and I want you to make the most of the funding that's there. So there are two strands: there's specialist NPQs, and which are 12 months, and then there's leadership NPQs. So these are 4. We've got leading primary maths as well, but that's only started this year. The curriculum's the same, but Teach First in response to feedback have moved modules around. So you can see here the teaching module that Jane mentioned, and now implementation right at the start of the course. So if you're on specialist NPQ, and this includes primary maths, which is the free funded one now, those are right at the start. So if curriculum develop is one of your key themes in literacy or in maths, for example, you've got a really lovely structure here for colleagues in school to be able to implement some of the changes that you want to do. So I just wanted to highlight how the commonality really across those specialist NPQs, and that really heavy focus on that implementation cycle, doing less things well, thinking about monitoring how you, when you're implementing change, how do you act, where's your feedback loop, how do you know it's actually working? And that's exactly what Elaine's been sharing with you today about how they do it in that school. So it's just giving you the tools which Jane's just described perfectly in terms of her school development. So those are the specialist NPQs. The only one which is fully funded to all schools now is the leading primary maths, but it contains very similar modules, just with the maths focus. If you are in the top 50% pupil premium, so the top half of schools for pupil premium, you would get funding for any NPQ. And Dawn and I were just reflecting that some small schools, based on 1 child, 2 child, will fall into that category. So please, we did send an email to schools to say if they were eligible for all NPQs. If you're not sure and you think you might be because of your legacy year 6, get in touch with us and we can confirm that. But for this cohort in October, nobody knows about beyond October because we've got a change of government and we're in Purda, but that's what it is for this year. Leadership NPQs, I think there's probably a bit more interest in this for colleagues at the minute. So we've now got obviously the additional special educational needs NPQ, which is the new mandatory SENCO qualification. So if you've got a new SENCO in your schools, this is the qualification that they need to do. All the leadership NPQs are 18 months long. They are similar in the same way that the modules are similar for lead specialist. I've just had a nice neat diagram, but these are the common ones that come across all of the modules. There is a curriculum module. Obviously, SEND is there across all of the leadership NPQs, organisational management, implementations there, culture. But then there's a specialisation over the 18 months within those different fields. SEND is not just for new SENCOs, it can be for aspiring SENCOs as well. So thinking about developing capacity, you know, forward planning for when you might have a need for additional SENCO, or just, you know, we've got lots of the ambition from NASEN was that they wanted every head teacher to be trained on the NPQ SENCO, because it's about leaders having that strategic knowledge of how SEND is implemented in schools, because of the, you know, the huge need at the moment and moving forward. So that's the leadership NPQs, and the only other one that's free is headship. So that continues to be free to all schools, and that's just a little bit of a summary of the funding. And I've just put the detail of LPM up there because that's the one that is primary specific and is fully funded to schools. We're limited at the minute because of PARDA about what we can direct to schools in terms of communication, but everything is up to date on our website and the applications are open. So I understand it's a challenging way to convey information, and it is a very dynamic situation. We've just had our allocation confirmed today, so we're starting now to confirm with people that they've got places for October. And I think that's about all I can say at the minute, but I'm happy to take any questions from people on NPQs.
Okay, thanks, Pauline. I'll take the slides down and then I'll stop recording the session. And then if anybody would like to ask questions, feel free to. I've stopped the recording. So if people want to ask questions,